I am so very excited to have Zen Honeycutt, the founding director from Moms Across America.
Zen Honeycutt from Moms Across America.
Zen Honeycutt heads Moms Across America, a group formed to raise awareness about toxic exposures.
This is not what I set out to do. I was a former fashion designer, and then my kids they all got sick. And like millions of moms and dads across America, I did not know what to do. I did not know why. So I dove into the food supply, GMOs and glyphosate.
We want to trust that what is in the grocery store is safe. And the shocking reality is that in many cases, it's not.
Moms Across America is a national organization of unstoppable moms. And we started this because we really want to empower moms and have healthy kids. And that's our tagline, Empowered Moms, Healthy Kids. We are so proud and happy to have thousands of volunteers across the country, to have groups around the world, to have spoken around the world, to have been in over a dozen international movies around the world. Our mission is to empower millions to educate themselves about GMOs and related toxins, to offer GMO-free and organic solutions, and through empowering local leadership, we create healthy communities together.
There are GMO foreign proteins in our food since 1996. They first started in the milk, and then they put them in soy and corn, which is in everything that we eat. I was shocked that these foreign proteins were in our food without our knowledge, without our permission, and without labeling.
The most common GMOs are GMOs that are genetically engineered to withstand herbicides, as you see being sprayed right now. This is predominantly GMO soy and other crops that are genetically engineered to withstand glyphosate, the toxic chemical ingredient in Roundup.
And what we're looking at is not just having one company stop using glyphosate, we're going after entire industries. We need to make sure that this chemical is banned. And as a mother, I will not stand for this. I ask every single person to become an activist, to share with everybody, to do whatever you can, and to be very vocal about it.
Well, it's my honor and pleasure to be joined now by Zen Honeycutt, making the trip out. Thank you for joining us. You are just a force to be reckoned with. It's amazing. You just don't stop, and I want to thank you for that, because we have to be relentless, because the opposition is just all over everything we're doing.
Thank you so much. I want to thank my team. There are so many people at Moms Across America that have done things like sent in samples of their breast milk, and their children's urine, and the school lunch samples and the fast food samples that we're going to be talking about today. So it's not just me, it's an incredible team, as you know, with your team.
One of the things we were talking about preparing for this show, and some of us are, we cross a spectrum of generations, but my understanding now that what we're going to talk about is that schools have turned to fast food restaurants to make the school meals. So all the food pyramids and whether that was good or bad has been thrown out, and now is it true that companies like McDonald's who are making our school lunches?
Del, we were shocked to find out last year when we tested school lunches, 43 school lunch samples, in that process, that the school food lunch directors, the directors for the school lunches, they go to big conferences and there's booths set up, and there are fast food companies offering samples of their food, and that's how they choose what is going to be served to our children. Now, previously, they couldn't advertise that. There wasn't any advertising that was actually happening to the children, but since Impossible Foods has started to sort of infiltrate our school lunches, pretty soon Lunchables.
What is Impossible Foods? Is that a company?
That's fake. That's the fake burgers.
So fake burgers. So they're moving the school. Okay.
So now they were able to brand and let the children know on the menu it's an Impossible. So they're marketing to our children in school lunches. And then Lunchables will be doing that as well. And so we confirmed with the School Nutrition Association and other school food directors that that's what's happening. Fast food companies are supplying school lunches to our children. There are 30 million school meals that are served every day to our children. And the majority of the ingredients are derived from genetically modified foods like soy and corn. And also they're predominantly derived from crops that are sprayed with glyphosate as a drying agent, like wheat and peas and beans and legumes and things like that. So the wheat is it's contaminated, as we'll get into, with glyphosate. So that's why we tested fast foods.
So you went in and decided to test fast foods because they're the ones supplying this food supply to our children. Mm-hmm. Are you worried, even just doing this show, I just think these are giant, massive corporations. Are you worried about lawsuits or anything like that when you start on this journey? I mean, you're about to call out huge companies for, inadequate nutrition.
Anybody can sue for anything, but what we did was sent samples to a lab, they tested, and we're reporting the results.
Okay.
So these are the results. These are what they are. I have had some harassment, but we're going to keep going.
So how about we look into what you found? What is
Sure.
what is the headline here?
Oh my goodness, that our food is incredibly toxic. School lunches, first of all, just to backtrack to last year, 43 school lunches we tested, because 40 is a statistically significant number that the EPA and the USDA are not supposed to ignore, right?
Okay.
We found that 95.3% were positive for glyphosate. And in comparison, the Detox Project that tested a year or so before that, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency found that about 60% of the grocery store samples were positive for glyphosate. So 95.3% positive for glyphosate in our school lunches. And this is a known carcinogen, as you have reported, an endocrine disruptor. It causes liver disease at very low levels. A new study out shows that it contributes to leukemia in animal studies, especially in young rats. Over 50% that died were young rats. And so we're very concerned about leukemia and rising levels in children. And there's been, I believe, a 37% increase in childhood leukemia just in the past 10 years. So also it's a chelator. It makes the minerals that of any living thing that it touches, it makes the minerals unavailable, the vitamins and minerals. And it's also an antibiotic.
Just real quickly, because I think this is something that we've reported a lot on, and I have a new audience all the time. This was really, glyphosate was an industrial chemical used to clean out boilers and pipes and rust. They would put it in so it would suck all the rust and contaminants out of the pipes.
Yes.
Chelating,
Yes.
that word chelating, to pull it out. And then someone accidentally spilled this stuff on the ground. It killed every plant in sight. And then they said, oh my God, let's use it as an herbicide and start killing weeds. And then we made genetically modified crops that when you put this deadly chemical on them, they won't die. I mean, this is basically the cycle we're now in. So we're eating genetically modified food that simply the only modification was just make sure that this deadly toxic poison doesn't kill it. So now we're eating that poison, and whatever happens with a plant that is now resistant to deadly chemicals, and what's it doing inside of our body. But as you said, if it chelates all the minerals and things out of pipes, imagine what it's doing inside of your body. And it's a huge antibiotic, right? It's killing your bacteria and things like that.
Yeah, it kills your bacteria as well. Dr. Don Huber, who's a 60-year plant pathologist, says that the way glyphosate functions is it basically gives the plant AIDS. It strips it of its immune system, so the normally harmless bacteria in the soil can kill it. So imagine what that's doing to our bodies.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, so the way that it functions is very, very harmful. And we spray 280 million pounds of it a year on our food crops still, as a drying agent and on GMO crops. So it's sprayed not just on the GMO crops that are genetically engineered to withstand it, it's also sprayed as a drying agent so that the farmer can harvest it faster, predominantly on wheat, also on oats and peas and beans and legumes and things like that, a lot of grains.
So they dry those too? Like also every dry grain that
if it's not organic, if it's not organic, most likely will have glyphosate on it. So if you're not eating organic, you are eating glyphosate in practically every meal. And that's what we found in the school lunches, 95.3% positive for glyphosate. We found 74% positive for other harmful pesticides, 74% positive, and there were 27 different harmful pesticides. And nobody's testing what is the synergistic effect of that, right? We know when we put vinegar and baking soda into a volcano in second grade, what happens, but what happens when there's 27 different pesticides going on in our children's food for school lunches? Yeah. And then we found 100% positive of the school lunch samples positive for heavy metals, and some of them levels 6,923% higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. And these are highly carcinogenic and neurotoxic heavy metals in our food supply. And we believe this is predominantly coming from the manure that's coming from the confined animal feeding operation, outlets that have thousands and thousands of cows. The Roundup has been found to have heavy metals in it. The cows eat the grains that as we talked about, are sprayed with glyphosate as a drying agent, glyphosate herbicides, and it does not wash, dry, or cook off. So it goes into their feces, into the manure, and our crops are fertilized with them, and then the heavy metals, accumulate. So very concerning levels of heavy metals in school lunches. And then also there were veterinary drugs and hormones found in school lunches, abysmally low levels of minerals. So school lunches, very toxic. We found out that fast food suppliers supply school lunches. We said we got to test fast food too. Okay. So we tested the top 20 fast food brands, and we added in In-N-Out, because a couple of our board...
In-N-Out not a fast food brand?
It is, but it's number
20?
33.
Oh, got it.
It's not the top 20.
I was like, pretty sure that's fast food.
Yeah,
okay.
it is. But it's number 33, but our board members, really insisted, because it's been seen as one of the most healthy of the fast food brands.
Pictures of the potatoes being chopped right here, right? It's
yes,
healthy, it's
I
fresh.
mean, they're trying. They definitely are trying, right?
Yeah.
But we wanted to test them too, to see maybe they are healthier. Unfortunately, we found that they have issues too, In-N-Out. So we'll get into that. So the fast food brands, 100% positive for glyphosate, Del. 100%. And then the harmful pesticides, it was 76% positive for harmful pesticides. The highest level of, let me backtrack, the highest level of glyphosate was in Panera Bread.
Panera?
Yes, and they have a no-no list. They claim wholesome, good, clean food. So we want people to petition Panera. We have a petition on our website to petition them to put glyphosate on their no-no list, because if we could accomplish that would be a very big deal for the food supply. So Panera Bread was highest.
To what I think, and this is something that when we think of this desiccant drying plants, it's got to be even worse than using it on GMO plants, because it's the last contact it has. There's no rain, there's no moment where it then gets washed off. It's like, literally, let's kill this plant and then harvest it. They don't have, and if it doesn't wash off, all that wheat, all that's getting ground up, is just the last thing it did was get coated in glyphosate. And one of the tricks, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it will say, and this is, I think, I haven't read much about this, but when I read the bread, it says, non-GMO. And you go, oh, great. But it doesn't say organic, so non-GMO, well, wheat isn't a GMO product.
No, it's not.
But they're using glyphosate to kill it. But by not making it GMO, now it still dies, and that's the whole point. So when you're seeing non-GMO, people think, oh, that means it's healthy. No, actually, it's being covered with a chemical, one of the worst chemicals known to man.
Yeah, non-GMO Project Verified does not have anything to do with glyphosate. So that product could still be derived from crops that are highly sprayed with glyphosate. It's very disconcerting. That's why we encourage USDA organic with, along with that. But regeneratively grown organic, there's new brands out there that are very important for making sure it's not sprayed with glyphosate. So Panera Bread the highest, Arby's was next. Then harmful pesticides, 76% positive for harmful pesticides. And one thing that was really concerning was that, for instance, the Pizza Hut pizza, the cheese pizza along with pepperoni didn't have harmful pesticides detected. But the vegetable top pizza for Pizza Hut had 21 parts per billion of harmful pesticides.
Wow. They
both had glyphosate because of the grains, right, in the pizza. So what we see from things like the Heartland Health Research Alliance, that is, they showed that if Americans could just eliminate, just switch out their vegetables and fruit to organic, we would eliminate 98% of our pesticide consumption. So we're seeing that the harmful pesticide consumption, not glyphosate, right, other harmful pesticides, is coming from the fruits and vegetables. So if you're not eating organic and you're telling children for their school lunches to have an apple, to have, these other fruits and vegetables, you're actually contributing more pesticides to their diet if it's not organic. So we are adamantly opposed to any nutritionist or doctor or school lunch director telling kids eat more fruits and vegetables if they're not saying eat more organic fruits and vegetables. It's very, very important.
Yeah, what's such a bummer about that is just when you think about the socioeconomics around that, we buy organic for our family, but it's very expensive. And I used to say, you just got to make that sacrifice. But now I look at people are, as is being reported, coming up short, $5,000 short. Your average household is $5,000 short of their expenses in a year. And then you add organic. And one of the things that I think is we got to really look at is all the subsidies going to this crappy food. right? I mean,
Yes.
like you look at a Cap'n Crunch, this or like, I mean, just call out any of this toxic stuff that kids get. It's cheaper than the organic food, but it goes through all sorts of manufacturing that should be expensive, but they're being subsidized by our government when you look into it. I
Yeah.
mean, imagine if we were subsidizing the organic side of food so that make it more affordable to people, or at least give it an even playing field.
That's what needs to happen. And also, I'm a little disturbed that, for instance, the CEO of McDonald's makes $21 million a year, $1.8 million a month. An average worker at McDonald's makes $26,000 a year, $2,000 a month.
Wow.
And the average American spends $10,000 a year on their medical bills.
Wow.
So what is that? How is that worker even getting by?
Right.
You know, I mean, they can absolutely afford to do some quality control to make sure that these foods don't have heavy metals and toxins in them, and that absolutely needs to happen. So we have more results from the fast food. So the fast food also was 100% positive for glyphosate. 100% positive for heavy metals. Cadmium was one of the highest levels. And the highest level of cadmium was found in the In-N-Out French fries. Sorry, Californians.
Really?
Yeah, and then the highest level of lead was found in a Sonic cheeseburger. That was 912% higher than what the EPA allows in drinking water. And these, these heavy metals again are very carcinogenic, neurotoxic. We also found veterinary drugs and hormones in these fast foods, and that was very disturbing as well. 40 to 60% of the top 10 samples, we only tested the top 10 for these veterinary drugs because it's very expensive. 40 to 60% had monosin or narasin. And these are antibiotics that are ionophores, meaning they bust through cell barriers. And these particular antibiotics are extremely toxic to horses and dogs at very low levels and cause their hind legs to go paralyzed.
Wow.
I don't know what that's doing to the human
Right,
population.
what's it doing to children that
But
are eating that?
Everybody I know knows somebody with some type of like neuropathy or, some restless leg syndrome or
Yeah.
something going on with their legs. There's a lot of people. So I'm just speculating. It
Yeah.
may or may not be related, but that's, you just don't
And
know.
this is what to me, the NIH show,
They should be
billions
studying
of
this.
dollars. This is what they should be
Exactly.
studying, not how to pump out the next drug and get a patent on it, to deal with the problems or the autoimmune disease in this country. How about what's causing these autoimmune diseases? I mean, there's no money being put in at all, and we know we're in a crisis. And
Yes.
by the way, I keep quoting that number, 54% chronic illness in America. That number was 2011 from a 2006 study. Can you imagine where we're at now?
That's
And
10
they're
years
not
ago.
giving us, they're not doing that study anymore. We don't know, because I am sure it is off the charts. I think we'd be horrified.
it's more like 80. I think it's probably more
I
like 80%.
think you're right.
Yeah,
think
somewhere
you're right.
around there. Yeah, and then we also found an anti-parasitic called narcobazine, which is used for coccidiosis in chickens, but it's also an aviary contraceptive. They actually use it to prevent pigeons and geese from laying eggs around airports and state capitals and things like that around the world. Wow. So that was found in a Chick-fil-A sandwich. So what is that doing to Americans on a daily basis?
Right.
Eating
fertility,
eating an aviary
reports on that.
contraceptive, and we don't know that it's in the school lunches, but if fast food suppliers are supplying to school lunches, what is that doing to our children eating these veterinary drugs on a daily basis? So
Right.
we're extremely concerned about veterinary drugs being in the school lunches. I also want to mention that the heavy metal issue is very important. Dr. Michelle Perro, who wrote the book What's Making Our Children Sick, pointed out that this TSCA bill that passed a couple years ago around the Toxic and Pesticide Chemical Act, they excluded pesticides, but they kept heavy metals in. So according to the EPA's own regulations, they should ban school lunches and fast food because of the levels of heavy metals in them.
Wow.
It's off the charts, the amounts of heavy metals that we're getting. So that's a very important factor. Then the next thing we tested for one more thing is today we're announcing that we tested for industrial chemicals. We haven't announced this before.
This is just brand new. We were talking to you and you said this is just coming in today.
Yes, brand new news. So I might have to look at the screen a little bit
Okay.
on this one. But we had the highest levels there. There we go. Jack in the Box, the one sample of Jack in the Box, which was a cheeseburger sample, had this chemical isobutyl methyl ether, which is known as propane, over 14 million parts per billion. So it's 14,000 parts per million, but over 14 million parts per, yes, in this per serving. And this can cause difficulty concentrating, headaches, nausea, dizziness, weakness, and lightheadedness. The same sample also had over 6.6 million parts per billion per serving of this chemical called butanediol, and it's a central nervous system depressant. And I want people to read these side effects and think about if your family member has exhibited these. Central nervous system toxicity, meaning serious breathing problems, coma, amnesia, combativeness, confusion, agitation, vomiting, seizures, and very slow heartbeat. I know so many people whose children or their husbands or their family members are aggressive after eating junk food.
Yeah.
This is not okay with me, Del.
Right. Well, I mean, when you see all the discussions about violence in schools, a terrible story out of Nevada this week of a teenager being, beat to death by other kids, and just what is that rate? What is it that it's just like turning people into just violent beings?
Yeah, and it's breaking up marriages. It's destroying friendships and relationships, and I'm extremely disturbed about that. So I really would ask people before they make people wrong, or just have major arguments. Think about, look at the food that what are people eating, and try to be supportive there. So yeah, the industrial chemicals were off the charts and very disturbing. We have more information that will be coming out about that. And one disturbing thing that Dr. John Fagan, who is the head of the lab where we got this testing done and coordinated out of Health Research Institute labs, he said that there were more toxins in the fast food than there were nutrients.
Wow.
Yeah, we tested for minerals as well. And the mineral levels were so low that, just one example, for instance, copper, a person would have to eat 9 servings of Chick-fil-A chicken nuggets in order to get the recommended daily level intake of copper. And copper is very important in children, especially with autism, have an imbalance of copper and zinc. So across the board, the minerals were abysmally low. They were not sufficient for proper human function. For instance, vitamin B3 levels were so low. Well, there was no vitamin B9 and 12 in any of the samples tested. And that's imperative for cognitive function. So if that's all that children are eating, low-income children are only eating these school lunch meals a day.
Which is I mean, the beauty of the school lunch, and was one of the travesties of, sending everyone home during COVID, was some of these kids, that's the only meal they're getting. And these families that are underserved, that school lunch program is a lifesaver for these kids. And then just think, what they're getting is just a bunch of toxins and more chemicals than nutrients. It's really sad.
It's a travesty. Yeah, there definitely should be more money allotted for school lunches, and it should be for organic food.
Yeah,
we'll get into that. So then the next thing was we tested for vitamin Bs, vitamin B3. And as I mentioned, vitamin B9 and B12 have been connected to aggressive and violent behavior, a deficiency of them.
Don't have vitamin B in there.
Yeah, so there's a book called Food and Behavior, A Natural Connection by Barbara Reed Stitt. And she is a Lifetime Achievement Award winner. She studied the food supply for over 20 years. She studied criminals, parolees, and serial killers and high school dropouts. And what she found, that the one thing that they all had in common was not their socioeconomic background or their race, as you might suggest, looking at the prison system. It was actually whether they were black or white or any race or rich or poor, they bragged that they lived on junk food. And, that they were minerally deficient. She tested them and they were low in vitamin Bs. And when she replaced the food in the prisons or in the high schools with whole healthy foods, for instance, in one prison, the recidivism rate switched. Instead of 70% going out and coming back, 70% stayed out. And in the high school, out of 5,000 kids...
Just by changing their diet.
Just by changing their food, yep. And in the high school, instead of 500 kids dropping out, only 14 kids dropped out that year.
Wow.
And there's another prison study that showed in just, I believe it was 2 weeks, there was a 37% to a 50% drop in aggressive behavior just when a certain control group of prisoners got minerals and supplements.
Wow.
And this is echoed in an animal study as well. This is very important. I'm so glad to be able to tell this story because I think it's so impactful. There was a farmer in Germany that saw a decline of hamsters in his field. He had a monocrop cornfield. We know what that means. Pesticides, herbicides. The soil was like sand. It was very deficient. And this farmer reported it to the University of Strasbourg, and a scientist named Mathilde Tissier studied these hamsters. And what they found was a very disturbing behavior. These hamsters, the mother hamsters, were cannibalistic. They were eating their young on the first day of life. And when they tested these hamsters, they found that they were completely devoid of one vitamin, vitamin B3.
And when they administered the vitamin B3, the violent behavior completely stopped.
Wow. Wow.
So this begs to question, right?
Yeah.
What if we could diminish or stop a lot of violent behavior in America by simply having nutrient-dense food or supplementation? What if we could do that, Del? What if children did not have to be dying in school shootings? What if we didn't have to have 2 mass shootings a day?
Yeah.
You know, and we hear from our moms across America that this is the case. This is what they're begging us to do.
Yeah.
For instance, we had a mom from Santa Ana call us, and she said that she was translating for her friend that was with us, a low-income single mom, 4 kids with a language barrier. So she was telling us, my friend wants me to call you and tell you that when her child was 9 years old, her son, he had mental health issues. And the school ignored her until one day they called her and said, you need to come pick up your son. He just threatened to blow the school up with a bomb and kill everyone in it. And she said, well, I told you he has mental health issues and we need help. And so they said, okay, we'll send him to a psychiatrist. So they did, and this psychiatrist prescribed, after assessing him, an SSRI, an antidepressant.
Just put them on drugs.
Put him on drugs. But
where the side effect on
she
the
said-
box is like suicidal ideations and, you know, the possibility to become a school shooter. Doesn't quite say that, but
Right.
issues with
You read labels.
increasing
Yeah.
depression. Yes.
Yeah. So first he said that, and then she said, well, what about side effects? Are you sure? Is there anything else we can do? And he said, or you can look at what's in the food. What are you feeding him? And she said, well, pizza, you know, much like what's up on the screens here, pizza, you know, hot dogs, donuts, you know, whatever I can get into him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, have you thought about the preservatives, the dyes, the chemicals, the pesticides, the GMOs, all of that in the food? She said, no. And he said, well, you could either feed him organic or you can give him this drug for the rest of his life. So this mom decided to feed her child organic. She did organic rice and beans. You can do that, very cheap, $1.65 a meal maybe, right? And within 2 weeks, the teachers from the school called her and said, we don't know what you're doing, but this is a completely new human being.
Wow. In just that short of period of
2
time.
weeks.
2 weeks.
And she called me at that time because there had just been another school shooting in Florida. You remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
It was just the day before. And she said, Zen, I want you to keep doing what you're doing. I want moms across America to get the word out because I know that my son, who's now 17, would be one of those kids that would go to Walmart and buy a gun and shoot kids at his school. That's a very hard thing for a mother to admit. Mm-hmm. But she said, but he won't do that because he's eating organic food, he's healthy, he's responsible, he's creating community gardens in the area. And I said, you know what? You created a new future for your son.
Yeah.
And not only for your son, but you created a new future for everybody at that school because they're not traumatized. And you might even be creating a new future for all of America because he could run for office, create a service, create a product or something that will make a difference. I mean, think about the inventors of, you know, Google or Facebook or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like it just takes 1 or 2 people sometimes to start something that makes a huge difference for the rest of the world. So that's why we do what we're doing, because we want our children and our family members to be able to live up to their fullest potential. And right now, Del, the entire American population is being poisoned with neurotoxins, endocrine disruptors, things that destroy our hormones and cause people to have mental illness and to have physical, you know, health problems, chronic illnesses. So I can't emphasize this enough how important it is to not just to go organic, but to get involved and to take action so that every single human being has access to safe, non-toxic, nutrient-dense food, not just the people who can afford organic. Like enough is enough with that. Like you're saying, you can afford it, I can afford it, but a lot of people cannot, and that affects our entire community.
I just think about, you know, obviously I am into, you know, I'm sort of like less government in every way, but when I look at school systems, these are types of things where I feel like, you know, our audience says, and the last thing I want is my dollar is going to making school more expensive, or is it my responsibility to, you know, give organic school? That'd be expensive. It will certainly increase the cost of tuitions, you know, and public schooling, whatever that is. But what are we, of all the things we invest in? You know, we invest in wars all over the world, hundreds of billions of dollars, nobody bats an eye.
Yes.
Right? Bailing out Silicon Valley banks, a little bit of whining, and then we all move on. But God forbid you decide, you know what, how about we invest in the children of America and make sure that all they eat is organic food when they're in schools. They may not get it at home, may have family, but at least there, we're making sure they're not being poisoned. So many people just be like, oh, why would we waste our money there? And I want to think, and then you think about this. Well, your kid's at that school. And even if your kids got the organic lunch, what happens if they're in if a fight breaks out, or God forbid, a school shooting? To think that we could have done something that, did something there. And for anyone that's watching and thinking, oh, that's crazy, it's not. I mean, all the science that we've been showing over the last several years here on the High Wire is showing how more and more we're recognizing that the gut biome is really your second brain. And in many ways, serotonin, all of these things that we thought were affecting emotions is not coming from your brain, it's coming from your digestive system.
Yes.
And Zach Bush, so many great, things that he's worked on showing that we're not even absorbing the nutrients that we are getting, and they're minimized because our biome is so messed up. And just all of these things, investing back into humanity here and into our food systems, and all of this, there's so much we could do to make this world a better place. And it's not that hard, really. Let's take all the money in the ridiculous places we spend it bombing the world. How about we go into
and other countries have done it. For instance, there's a movie called The French Organic Food Revolution, where the mayor saw that kids were getting cancer and he saw the chemicals being sprayed on the nearby orchards. He took the money that they were giving to those chemical using farmers and gave it to the school instead and said, use this for organic food. He created a market right, for organic food by giving the money to the schools. And so that's what we need to do in America today. This current administration has set aside a whole lot of money right now for farm to school, meals. That is happening. However, there's a couple problems. For instance, in Wisconsin, one of our advisors, Mark Dudla from Dudla Farms, is a regenerative organic farmer. He can now send food to schools in Wisconsin for free for them. They have got, there's a certain allotment. But if they order beans from him or flour from him, they have to have a way to make it. A lot of these schools no longer have scratch kitchens.
Right.
They only have these trays that they put in microwaves and heat up this food. So instead of making more airplanes to bomb other people, how about putting scratch kitchens back into our schools and empowering the schools to be able to buy local food that's organic, that's regenerative organic, and making the food in their kitchens. And there's a couple organizations have done that. Turning Green has an organization called Conscious Kitchen, and so they're in California. You can follow them. And then there's another woman named Hillary Boynton that I met recently at the Children's Health Defense Conference. She has a company called schooloflunch.com, and so you can go and get training there on how to bring in your local, regeneratively grown, organic food into your schools and make it at your school. And so there are solutions, things that are happening. Also,
is there anything that happens at just sort of if you're in a school, do you have any power there to get parents together? Can you put pressure? Is this all bigger? Is it state-run issues? What are you seeing out there if you want your school to change these things?
You can do that. And Hillary Boynton from School of Lunch has pointed out that is possible. And there is money now, grants that people can apply for to get better school lunch food, to get better meals. It is challenging because a lot of the people at the schools will say, oh, well, we have to get, I think it's 15% of the food, the commodities from the USDA we have to get. But there's wiggle room there, right? That's only 15%. So the rest of the food you can source locally. You can have the money shifted towards those local sources. And there are more bills coming out to make that happen. There's a bill from Christina Shelton that is out right now that I just want to point people's attention to. We have an article on it on our website on Moms Across America. She has a bill that's for healthy school lunches, for more money for healthy school lunches. However, it misses the mark because it's not for organic food. Paying more money for this toxic food is just poisoning our children more,
Right.
So we really want to make sure that bill is amended, and we're asking people to go to our website, to go to their senators and representatives and tell them co-sponsor the bill only if that funding is for organic food or locally grown, regeneratively grown organic food. It doesn't have to be USDA organic. They just have to stop spraying poisons on it, Del.
Yeah.
They have to stop spraying glyphosate and other toxic chemicals as a drying agent on our food. That is move number one. And that would eliminate the majority of the toxic chemicals that we are consuming from our food supply. And then they've got to switch the fruits and vegetables over to organic. We've been farming for thousands of years without toxic chemicals.
I know.
This is not necessary. It doesn't have to be happening, and it needs to happen now because we're headed for not just a health crisis, but a mental health crisis, and it's a national homeland security issue. There are generals from the U.S. military that have said that our school lunches are a national homeland security issue because it's something like
Sure.
only 25% of the kids that apply to get into the military can get in because they have mental health issues or obesity. So we're putting ourselves, like, not setting ourselves up to be a superpower just because of the food that we're feeding our children. And by the way, China does not feed their military GMOs. I have spoken
Wow.
with a Chinese military person when I went to China to speak there about the food supply, and he told us we do not feed our military GMOs. Of course, Russia doesn't allow them, right? So what is America doing? How do we expect to be a superpower if we continue to poison our children?
Yeah.
This has to change.
Zen Honeycutt, again, so informative, and it really is a wake-up call. I think all of us go, well, I don't have time, we're busy, and how bad can it possibly be? It's obviously pretty bad.
It's pretty bad.
I didn't know fast food restaurants were supplying school lunches, so really amazing. And for that once in a while when we stop by, you have to think about, how many times you stop and get that fast food and do it yourself, it's bad.
It's not worth it. I know we're wrapping up here, but I want to thank Children's Health Defense for donating to the fast food testing, Moms Across America supporters. There were a lot of Moms Across America supporters, and also the Sentner Academy, our friend.
Leila Sentner.
Leila Sentner, yeah. So and David, we really want to thank them. And we want to do more testing, Del. We want to test gluten-free food, because we think that the ingredients in gluten-free food, the soy and the corn and the beans and all of that might be much higher for glyphosate.
That's another thing. It's sort of like non-GMO. I think people think gluten-free healthy, and I read the ingredients, and you just start seeing like these huge lists of ingredients. I was like, I just can't imagine that is the step we're supposed to be taking. We've got to have better answers than that.
We do, and I want to point out that we, Moms Across America, we're testing. And so we would love to have more funding for testing. We want to test military food as well and children's hospital food. And we have brought this information to Congress. So Kelly Ryerson from Glyphosate Facts, she's a board member on our board, arranged a meeting with through Cory Booker's office, Senator Cory Booker's office, and we had a congressional briefing because the EPA, I've met with them 4 times, has said, go to Congress. They got to change the laws regarding all this. So we went to Congress, and then they said, go to the USDA. So we went to the USDA and met with them, and they said, well, really, it's the FDA and the dietary guidelines. So we went to the FDA, and that was really upsetting. The meeting with the FDA was really upsetting because they said, well, the EPA, they point us back to the EPA. This is all,
Just go over there. They would just send you around, like literally just spinning
it's ridiculous.
Circles.
Yeah, so they said go back to the EPA, and the FDA also said, well, the EPA sets the regulatory levels, for the amounts of pesticides allowed and heavy metals allowed in food. We just enforce. So I said, so how do you enforce? And they said, well, we test pesticides and we put out a report. It's 2 years later, you get to see it, than when it actually was done. I said, well, actually, as a member of the Organic Products Advisory Board in California, when I lived in California, I saw those lists of what you were testing for. I saw the FDA and, the federal EPA list, and I saw the California Food and Drug, and Agriculture list. And I also saw what the EPA says are the top 25 most widely used pesticides. Top 25 most widely used. And I looked at the list with what the FDA is testing for. I looked at the list of what California Department of Food and Ag is testing for. Guess how many were on these lists? The federal list was 2 of those chemicals, the most widely used chemicals they were testing for. The California list was 3.
So they weren't even testing for the most important things they should be testing for.
Yeah, so I said, I believe that report that's being put out is misleading to the American public. You're not actually testing for the most widely used herbicides and pesticides. And John Fagan was on that call from the lab, and he said, how come you guys aren't testing for parquat? Things like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of the most widely used toxic, and they're like, well, we're always improving we're always looking at that. And so anyway, I just want to let you know that they're passing the buck all over the place.
Indeed.
And that's why what we're doing as consumers is so important. This show is so important. Please donate to the show. Getting the word out.
Let's donate to you right now because this is so important. Moms Across America, pull that, check out this website right now. I want you to do your part. We need this information. And by the way, it's information like this that that, you know, nonprofits like mine, can go and sue over when we have these, you know, proof in our hands. So we're all working together on these issues in order to make a difference in this world. You are just, it's so invaluable right now at this time. No nonprofit could do it all. I mean, I'm just glad, I'm glad you're doing it.
I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
We're really busy over here, so keep up the great work, and, you know, really, really, really important. And I love that you just are so tenacious.
Thank you.
They got their hands full with you.
We're going to keep going.
All right, you take care.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Dill.
coming in.